Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me this platform this evening. It was wonderful to hear Dominic earlier speaking in such fluent and perfectly accented Mandarin, a tribute to his teachers and to his own hard work. And even though Nick was modest enough to say that he couldn't match it, as we all know, Nick is very fluent in a different sort of Mandarin. Having been a distinguished public servant and civil servant, not only in the Department for Education, but also in 10 Downing Street, Nick is absolutely fluent in the Mandarin which is spoken in Whitehall and the small community around it. And I've become a keen student of this new language in the course of the last 10 months. I didn't speak a word of it before I became a government minister, but now that I have joined the government, I'm aware of exactly how to understand this subtly inflected language. Yes, Minister. When a Mandarin says, yes, Minister, what of course they mean is, no, Minister. When they say, that is very brave, Minister, what they really mean is, do you enjoy being a minister? Because you won't be one for much longer. And when they say, please accept this invitation, it's a wonderful platform in which you can address many stakeholders. What they mean is, I'm afraid all the other ministers have turned this invitation down. It's up to you. But I have to say on this occasion, this was an invitation which I leapt to accept. And the reason that I'm so glad to be here is that firstly, it gives me an opportunity to say thank you to a number of people. Firstly, it gives me an opportunity to express my gratitude to Sir Cyril Taylor, the founding father of the SSAT, someone who's done more in his life to contribute to improving education in this country and forging relationships between the United Kingdom and China than any other living public servant. So, Sir Cyril, I'm very grateful for your work and for you continuing good advice to all those of us who toil in the paddy fields at the Department for Education. And I also want to thank your inspirational successor, Liz Reed. Those of you who know Liz may not know that she, like me, was brought up and educated in Aberdeen, in the northeast of our United Kingdom. For those of you from China, I'd like you to think of Aberdeen essentially as the Harbin, the capital of Manchuria, in the United Kingdom. It is a beautiful city in the apparently frosty northeast, where you're always assured of a warm welcome. But in Liz's case, I have to say that my admiration for her goes beyond our shared northeast heritage, because under her leadership, the SSAT has been an absolutely wonderful model of how to drive improvement across an education system. The SSAT embodies the principle that in education we should, above all, trust the teacher. The SSAT has shown us that the best people to inspire teachers are other teachers, and the best people to show heads how to improve their school are other heads who've already generated amazing improvements. And the most powerful indicator of the SSAT's success is that so many heads and so many schools want to be part of Liz's success story. Under Liz's inspirational leadership, everyone in the SSAT is part of a family of professionals committed to raising standards for all children, and we are all in Liz's debt. Now, as well as thanking Liz, I'd also like to thank another formidable woman who bends ministers to her will. I'm talking about Madame Zhu Lin of the Confucius Institute, whom I was fortunate enough to meet when I visited China last November. During the 2 days, alas too short, that I spent in Beijing, I toured around the Forbidden City, attended banquets in the Great Hall of the People, traversed Tiananmen Square. I met the President of China, I met Premier Wen Jiabao, I met the Cabinet. I saw the cream of the Chinese military on parade, I discussed policy with the Minister of Education, and I supported the Prime Minister in trade talks with China's head of state. But the most fun I had was when I met Madame Zhu Lin, because it was during that visit to the Confucius Institute, a sadly hurried, but for me immensely enjoyable hour, that I was able to appreciate properly for the first time the pride that China rightly takes in its amazing cultural achievements. Its architectural heritage, its history, its succession of scientific breakthroughs, its people's long record of inventiveness, its achievements in the graphic and plastic arts, its music, its philosophy, its poetry, all of them outstanding testaments to an amazing culture. I was also able to understand a little more of the building blocks on which these achievements rest. The suppleness and beauty of Mandarin as a means of expression, the reverence for learning which Chinese people share, and the joy in sharing knowledge which Chinese teachers feel. And the more that we know of China in the West, I'm sure the better for all our people. And the more open our conversation between our peoples, the more that we can both learn for the better. And one of the things that I learned very powerfully during my visit was how much China's recent phenomenal success, its peaceful rise, has depended on celebrating learning, valuing teaching, and expecting each generation to do better than ever before educationally. And that brings me to the third person that I want to thank, a physics teacher at one of the schools I visited during my time in Beijing. While I was being shown around the classrooms, he handed me a thick book, mostly written in Chinese characters, but interspersed, I could see, with diagrams, and also with paragraphs in English. "Is this a textbook?" I asked. "No," he replied. "These are actually scientific research papers that the school has had published in academic journals, all bound together in one volume." And sure enough, as I looked at the odd paragraph in English, I could see that they were abstracts of articles from journals of microbiology or astrophysics. "Gosh," I replied, "you must have some pretty impressive teachers in this school if they're able to publish original academic research in scientific journals while also doing their stuff in the classroom." "I'm afraid you don't understand," the teacher replied. "These papers weren't written by the teachers. They were written by the pupils." And the reason that I want to thank that particular teacher and his pupils is because he demonstrated to me in person what the whole world was going to be told a few weeks later. That in the global race to develop a world-beating education system, we sadly in this country are still languishing behind the rising nations of the East. And we are falling further and further behind all the time. At the beginning of December last year, just weeks after I returned from China, the OECD published its league tables of international school performance. These PISA tables, the initial stand for progress in student attainment, showed that far from progressing relative to other nations, we in the UK had been regressing. We had moved backwards over the last 10 years in how literate our students were relative to other nations. We had moved backwards in the last 10 years over how numerate our students were relative to other nations, and we had also moved backwards relative to other nations in the level of scientific competence and understanding that our students had relative to other nations. The gap was particularly striking in maths, where we moved from 10 years ago being 8th in the world to now being 28th in the world. Top spot in maths, of course, went to China, and in particular to Shanghai. There are nearly 15 times as many students per head of population in Shanghai operating at the highest level mathematically in their teenage years than there are in the UK. The truth is that we have so much to learn in this country from China about how to improve our school education. And today, I'd like to touch on just 3 lessons. 1, the belief in meritocracy. 2, respect for the teacher. And 3, restless self-improvement. Meritocracy, first of all. China was the world's most impressive civilization for so long in the past because it was the first nation to develop an effective meritocracy. While we in the UK, or more particularly in England, were awarding power and privilege to individuals on the basis of noble birth or royal favoritism, the Chinese were operating a unified national examination system with success in that exam determining who would run the state. We congratulate ourselves in the West on establishing the democratic ideal of meritocracy over the last 200 years, on the ruins of the old Ancien Regime. We are proud of the fact that in continental Europe, the Napoleonic ideal of the career opened talent took root. We're particularly proud in this country of the fact that the great Victorian reforms to the universities, the civil service, and the officer class created a meritocracy in this country. But we were centuries behind the Chinese model of promotion, being purely dependent on the eternally winning combination of hard work and intellectual merit. And just as we were behind the Chinese 200 years ago, I fear that we are still behind the Chinese now. Our country's pretensions to being a meritocracy are actually cruelly undermined by the stubborn fact of entrenched interests in our country still blocking social mobility at every turn. Take entry to our elite universities. As we all know, in any given year, There are 600,000 students leaving school in England. 600,000 students in every cohort. Of that 600,000, there are 80,000, broadly, the very poorest, who are eligible for free school meals, just shy of 20%. 80,000 children, the very poorest, but still a significant number of the total quantum. How many of those 80,000 do you imagine make it to our top universities? The answer, I'm afraid, is just 40. The odds against a child eligible for free school meals making it to one of our elite universities are staggeringly high. And the odds have grown in the last few years. The last year for which we have figures, as I say, showed that 40 children from that background made it to elite universities. In the year before that, it was 45. And the sad truth is that this particular fact is merely the apex of a pyramid of social immobility. The truth is that the gaps between children who are born to privilege and children who are born to poverty start at birth and grow wider in the years between 0 and 5 before they go to school. And we have a situation in this country, sadly, as the academic Leon Feinstein has pointed out, where children of high cognitive ability from poor homes are overtaken by children of lower cognitive ability from wealthy homes before they arrive at school. Surely, however, school should make up the difference. School, where the state intervenes, we've designed a curriculum, where we devote resources, where we have the energy to make a difference, surely that should overcome the accidents of birth. But the truth is, far from our schools being the engines of social mobility, they operate in precisely the reverse way in the United Kingdom. The gap between students from poorer homes and wealthier homes is wider at the end of Key Stage 1 than it was at the beginning of school. Wider still at the end of Key Stage 2, at the end of primary. Wider still by the time that students are sitting their GCSEs, and of course widest of all at A level, which is why it's the case that if we look at the number of children eligible for free school meals who secured 3 A's at A level, in the last year for which we have figures, the total number was just 175. And the number of boys was just 75. It's stunning to think, out of a cohort of the size that we have, who are eligible for free school meals, how few succeed in getting to the pinnacle of our education system. And the result of this inequality is that a small minority of English children, educated in the very best schools in both the state and independent sector, grab a disproportionate share of the glittering prizes. And it's especially striking how many of those are privately educated. In every field, judges, newspaper editors, the chairman of FTSE 100 companies, members of the cabinet and the shadow cabinet. It is striking how many have been privately educated or educated in selective schools. But it's not just in those establishment areas where it takes perhaps time to climb the ladder, where we might have expected that things would have been more ossified. It's also the case that amongst those successful institutions that draw from amongst our younger adults, the independent fee-paying sector still has a lock on senior positions. The England cricket team, whose success in the Ashes we celebrate, of those educated in this country, a majority were privately educated. The England rugby team, that's succeeded in beating some nations recently. Of those educated in England, a majority were privately educated. We know that a majority of those who won medals in Beijing were privately educated. What you may not know is that of those UK-born acts who won medals at the recent Brit Awards for rock music, that 2 of the most conspicuous, Laura Marling, best female newcomer, and Mumford & Sons, were also privately educated. What does it come to when the classic icons of rebellion, the rock stars whom our young are celebrating, are all public schoolboys and girls? What it reinforces is that our pretensions to meritocracy in the United Kingdom are just that, pretensions. And it's because I want opportunity to be more equal, it's because the SSAT exists to ensure that opportunity should become more equal, that this coalition government is making a variety of reforms. We're spending more money on the poorest children so that those eligible for free school meals will receive a pupil premium. Extra cash, rising to £2.5 billion, devoted to ensuring that their attainment is greater. It's why today I have written to local authorities to say that those schools which are underperforming, overwhelmingly concentrated in areas where children are poor, have to demonstrate in the next 2 weeks a solid plan to turn around their performance, or we will ensure that intervention occurs so that those schools are placed in the hands of individuals who are capable of guaranteeing a better future for the children who are currently in those classrooms. In many cases, that will mean a bigger role for the superb schools who are at the apex of the SSAT's leadership. And of course, one of the other things that we have said is that we need to ensure that there are more great teachers in the classrooms where the most disadvantaged children are currently learning. And that is why we have doubled the amount of money that we're spending on Teach First, the prestige route into teaching for graduates from the very best universities who want to teach in the most challenging schools. Now, these are a series of interventions which I hope will decisively shift our education system towards a greater degree of meritocracy and opportunity open to all. And I wanted to underline the third of those, getting the best teachers into the classroom, because the second great lesson that we can learn from China is the vital importance of the teacher when we think of improving education. Everyone in education has their own pet theories about how we can improve the situation. Reduce class sizes, more emphasis on Latin, cookery at Key Stage 3, soldiers as teachers. Some of them are better ideas. All of them are well-intentioned. But the truth is, the single best way of improving educational outcomes is having better teachers. That's what's proven when you look across the world. It's what's known in the Shanghai classrooms that are doing so well. China is fortunate in that culturally, the role of the teacher is celebrated and respected as in few other nations. It's striking that in those countries where there is a large Chinese diaspora, for example in Singapore, there is the same cultural regard. It's a cultural, not a political phenomenon, and it has its roots in the Confucian tradition that we exist to celebrate. Confucius was a teacher himself. And the regard and respect that Chinese society and individuals have for the teacher is something that we should seek to replicate and enhance here. We in the UK should see teachers as professionals, to be respected, like academics in university, guardians of the intellectual life of the nation. And that is why I am determined to do everything I can to enhance the prestige and esteem of the teacher. We can do it in practical ways, by ensuring that the classroom is a safer place for adults, so by making sure that teachers have the powers that they need in order to maintain order, so that they can inspire the next generation with the love of the subject that drew them into the classroom in the first place. We can do it by also ensuring that becoming a teacher actually becomes more difficult. Because, as we all know, whether it's being a civil servant, or being a brain surgeon, or being a fighter pilot, jobs which are prestigious are those which it is difficult to get into. And by raising the bar on entry into a job, you make it more prestigious, so that more talented people want to be part of that elite group. So we're raising the threshold on entry into the teaching profession and sending a clear signal that we want the best minds shaping the minds of the next generation. But we also recognize that simply attracting the best and making sure that they feel safe isn't enough. We need to offer everyone who's currently working in the teaching profession the chance to enhance their credentials through a program of improved continuous professional development, so that whether it's additional information about how to develop the best teaching techniques, or the chance to develop more deeply the subject that they love, all teachers have a chance to live the life of the mind outside the classroom as well as in it. But there's one other critical thing that we need to do as well. We need to affirm the importance of the teacher as someone who passes on knowledge to the next generation and inducts the next generation into the best that has been thought and written. We need to say that the teacher is not a learning coach operating alongside the student. The teacher is someone who is passing a precious gift, knowledge on to the next generation. And that's at the heart of the national curriculum changes that we wish to make. It's fashionable these days to say that children don't need knowledge because knowledge is available at the click of a mouse. It's all on Google or on Wikipedia. Let's just think about it for a moment. You and I are getting on a plane. Let's say we're flying to Beijing. We turn to the pilot. Tell me, do you know how to fly this plane? No. I have motor skills, high level of coordination. I'm committed to teamwork. As for knowing how to fly the plane, well, it's all there on Google and Wikipedia, isn't it? How safe would you feel? Imagine the same situation. You're about to entrust your loved one to the care of a surgeon. You ask that surgeon, do you have the knowledge necessary to ensure that my child is going to be safe? The surgeon says, well, actually, I'm quite supple, thoughtful, sensitive. I've learned how to analyze my own learning processes. But as for knowledge about which organ goes where, well, don't worry. It's all on Google or Wikipedia. The truth is that without a substratum of knowledge, the skills that we cherish, particularly at the highest end of learning, cannot be properly deployed. And it is only by underlining the importance of knowledge and the importance of the teacher as the guardian of knowledge that we can once more ensure that our education system competes with the world's best. The final area where I think that we can learn from China is recognizing that education is actually, by definition, a program of self-improvement. It's all about doing better. It's all about each of us, not just indulging our curiosity, powerful as that is, but becoming better at what matters, more accomplished in the playing of a musical instrument, more fluent in a beautiful language like Mandarin, more adept, almost to the point of automaticity, in the way in which we can handle mathematical processes. Education is about doing better. And that is why we, politicians,